Sorry, friends. Good morning and shalom, and welcome to this episode of the Watchdog, exclusively on the Synagogue News. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are living in biblical times, and for the first time in a long time, that adjective is positive, or at least potentially positive. There's been a leak recently as far as some Supreme Court decisions. It may or may not be true. It has been confirmed by the Chief Justice, but nothing's been codified. So that's what I mean by may or may not be true. But nonetheless, we are going to be talking about that, of course. And yeah, I'm a little bit at a loss for words because I didn't think this would ever end up happening. I still kind of don't believe it, but I'm excited. I'm excited. Let me tell you, I haven't been excited about anything that's happened in this country politically since I was probably like 14 years old, and I'm not actually kidding. So this is cool. We're going to get into that, have a lot of interesting conversation to have here. But before we do, I want to go ahead and say, if you're here, please do like and share this video. Please consider subscribing to the Synagogue News if you want to get notified every time we go live. We try to go live every Tuesday and Thursday. Please consider hitting that bell so that you get notified every time that we go live. Because, of course, subscriptions don't do what they used to some 4 or 5 years ago when YouTube actually functioned. Now, unfortunately, YouTube has the functioning ability of a debilitating grandpa. So, or a debilitated grandpa, I guess I should say. So yeah, that's what we're currently experiencing right now. So hit that bell. You still might not get notified, but you have more of a likelihood of getting notified than you would if you didn't hit the bell. So, there's that. Also, if any of you guys want to follow us on any of the different social media platforms which you frequent, I'm on most of them. You can follow me at the Synagogue on Twitter, Gab, Parler, Minds, or Facebook. My display name is going to be different on every single one of them, but the tag name, which is the actual username, is the Synagogue, so very easy to find. And yeah, definitely consider sharing this video to those platforms, maybe giving your boy a tag, and hey, might as well follow, right? If you're there, you're there. Which reminds me, specifically, get on Gab. I haven't been advertising that as much. To be fair, I'm not being paid for this, so I guess advertising isn't even the right word. But I do think you should get on Gab. So if you are a user of the Twitter kind of social media, I know Elon Musk just bought Twitter, and it's supposed to be freer and all that other kind of stuff. The company had its chance and it failed as far as I'm concerned. And frankly, you can have a Gab and a Twitter. I mean, that's what I do. I just do everything that I do on Twitter on Gab, almost at least, because, you can't follow athletes on Gab yet. They're just not there. But nonetheless, you know what I mean? Definitely consider getting on Gab. I'd recommend getting on Parler as well. Both are free speech platforms that are essentially clones of Twitter. So if you like Twitter, there you go. Also, Minds is kind of in that same category, but Minds is sort of a unique thing unto itself, and I do really like Minds. But nonetheless, I want to go ahead and just give a shout out to all of those companies. Also, want to recommend that you guys follow us at the Synagogue on Rumble. I use that as a sort of backup to post all of my political content, which has not been happening recently, so I apologize. But YouTube overlords really don't like conservative talk shows. That's technically what this would be. So if you like this program, please consider going to Rumble, getting an account there. It is free, and following us there. I can't go live there yet because you do have to pay for that. And unfortunately, I just don't have the money to pay for another subscription at this point in my life. But we do try to post the videos after the fact. Fun fact, that is not true as of the last 2 months, but I'm going to make it true. I'm going to make it true. Okay. I promise I'm going to get on board with this. All right. I completely lack discipline. And so it's really difficult for me to try and give you guys high quality, well-researched content consistently, but I'm going to do it. All right. But by God, as my witness and strength, I will get it done for you. I promise. But nonetheless, thank you guys very much who are here. I want to give a brief shout out to Cryptomaria, Richard Neal, Kelby Quayle, all in the live chat. Thank you guys very much. Shalom. And yeah, that's basically all we have for the Twitter announcements. Oh, actually, no, there is one more. 2 more actually, because there's a new thing we're doing here, and so not everybody would know about it. So first thing, do remember, if you guys like the content that we put out here, you definitely can help me turn this into a career. I plan on being a full-time, I don't know what the word really would be. I guess just academic, right? Because I want to do apologetics. I want to write history and philosophy works. I want to write, fiction and all this other kind of stuff. But, I also, I don't know. I feel like academic isn't the right word, right? But whatever it is that I do, I want to do it professionally, and you guys can help that happen. If you'd like to help that happen, please consider giving to the Patreon. Just do so only if you believe I deserve it and have earned it. I am not interested in getting your money because you think I'm so super dandy and awesome. I'm interested in getting your money because you think I have earned the right to actually have this as a career, right? I think we have an oversaturation of absolute nonsense in this country, both on the left and right, both on the atheist and Christian side, which are both of the two things my podcasts are involved in, right? And that starts with y'all, right? That starts with y'all giving your support, throwing your support behind people who are well-researched, who are giving you truth, who are trying to be as unbiased as possible, who are being honest with you, all those different kinds of things. If you think I'm one of those people, please consider giving to the Patreon. If you don't want to give in a subscription format, maybe don't have the money, maybe just don't know if you trust the program quite yet or anything like that, but you do want to give one time, you can also do that as well via a PayPal, and the links to those are in the live chat. And then the last thing I want to say, which isn't really an announcement, but it's just a new thing we're doing. Remember, guys, if you have questions for me, tag me at the Synagogue News. We're doing something now where at the end of our watchdogs, I am responding to all questions which the audience wants me to answer. At this point, we're still small enough that I can actually get to all of them. Obviously, once we start getting larger, I might have to create some kind of monetary incentive for that or something like that, if and when that happens, right? But at this point in time, questions are very, very manageable, right? Because of the fact that we're still a relatively small show. Even if we get up to 10, 15 viewers, right? That still tends to be a small enough amount of viewers that I can actually get to all your guys' questions. So if you have questions for me, tag me at the Synagogue News with your question, and then I'm going to answer all the questions at the end of the program when we've already talked about everything we want to talk about. So that's all of our announcements and stuff like that. Let's get to our pre-article discussion. I really need to come up with something more catchy for those. But nonetheless, the discussion we have before we get to the articles, it's going to be short because I don't know much about this, but I figured it would be a failure on my part if I did not talk about this a little bit. And that is, there is talk in the Twitterverse about leaked Pfizer documents, 80,000 pages of documentation that Pfizer was aware of some of the negative side effects of its vaccines and ignored them and basically wanted to put the product out anyway. Now, I cannot confirm nor deny that this leak exists or anything about this leak for that matter. I've not read it. I've seen nothing more than Twitter posts on the issue, right? So I really am not sure, I'm really not sure what the deal is, I guess. It's just to be perfectly honest with you, right? And I'm not saying that to deny anything or to approve of anything, right? I'm just saying that for the most part, what I'm saying right now is things that I believed before any of this because I am ignorant as to what's actually in these documents, right? With that being said, though, it appears that there are a lot of people on the internet convinced that this is real, and what this is supposed to be the leak of 80,000 some odd pages of documentation, which shows that Pfizer was, and not just aware of negative side effects, but of a litany of them, namely negative side effects to fetuses in the womb, negative side effects to female fertility, negative side effects as far as heart health is concerned. And so, again, true, not true, I don't know. But what I do know is it does seem like those were following the Pfizer vaccine, right? And in fact, there's been questions about all of them, but even a lot of the mainstream voices have been a little bit questioning, have found the Pfizer vaccine a little bit questionable, right? So it wouldn't surprise me if this was a totally legit document, right? Now, the other thing that makes this particularly interesting is some of you guys may recall, like 6-ish months ago, something like that, we did a watchdog talking about how Pfizer was essentially in bed with governments, United States government included, to try and make sure that their vaccine was the vaccine that was actually being promoted. And that would obviously add a pretty interesting twist to this if it turned out that these leaked documents were accurate, right? Basically, what you have at that point would be at the absolute worst, a company knowingly selling a product to a government and wanting that government to promote the product to its populace at a state level, excuse me, I'm wording this terribly, but while having knowledge of all of these potential side effects, that would be the absolute best case scenario. Worst case scenario would be that the United States government was obviously completely aware of this as well and decided that they wanted to promote that one as opposed to one that was neutral or maybe less harmful or maybe harmless, right? So we're definitely going to want to look into that, whereas in not just us here at the Synagogue News, but also all of y'all, right? That should be something that intrigues us. This could just be a big nothing burger. I mean, to be honest with you, at this point, there is so many different leaks that have happened that are just absolute garbage, right? From the Donald Trump N-word leaks to the My Pillow guy clearly documenting quote unquote voter fraud, right? And et cetera, and et cetera. And those are obviously a right wing and a left wing popular examples, right? A popular example, rather. Some of you may recall there was all this talk like, oh, they're gonna have a coup to overthrow the unelected government, or we're gonna have Trump established back on the White House throne or whatever you'd call it. Excuse me. By March and blah blah blah, all this other kind of stuff. A lot of times these leaks are that, especially when it's hard to find links to the actual documents, right? So I wouldn't necessarily put too much stock into all of this yet, but I would say this is something that should interest us. We should all be intrigued by the possibility that these leaks are real and by the possibility that our government may have been completely and totally aware of potential negative side effects and then decided to promote this vaccine anyway. It's certainly within the realm of possibility. It wouldn't even be the worst thing the United States government's ever done, frankly. I mean, let's just look at the genocide of Native Americans or, Roe v. Wade or the dehumanizing of the mentally handicapped or slavery or the invasions of Iraq and Vietnam. And I think you could probably add a lot of the Middle Eastern countries that we don't typically think about there as well, like Libya and Somalia and Syria and so on and so forth. The point just being, like, this would be really low down the list of like confirmed evils that the United States government has perpetrated, right? So it really wouldn't be surprising. It'd be a little bit more conspiratorial than the rest of those, but conspiracies do exist. We happen to know that. Obviously, a lot of conspiracy theories are nonsense, but a lot of conspiracy theories are just facts, right? And so, yeah. But with that, let's go ahead and get into the articles today. I originally had a completely different set of things I was going to talk about today, and if we end up getting to those, so be it. If not, so be it as well. But then this happened yesterday. This leak occurred. And according to this leak, the Supreme Court is currently drafting a decision that would, in effect, repeal Roe v. Wade. Now, the interesting thing about this is the Chief Justice, I believe it's the Chief Justice, Roberts, has actually confirmed that the leak is real and is currently investigating to figure out who leaked this sensitive information, which of course would be a crime. Does that mean that we're actually going to see this come to fruition? Well, no, it's just a draft at this moment. There's not been a decision made at this moment. So it's possible, hate to be the cynic, but it is possible that all of this could end up being for naught, right? However, so far, it doesn't seem like that's the case. So far, it does seem like the courts are actually going to attempt to repeal Roe v. Wade. They have the votes, 5-4. If I am understanding correctly, it is the 3 Trump nominees as well as Justice Alito and Justice Thomas. So for those of you who may not be familiar with those names, that's Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, Samuel Alito, and Clarence Thomas. If I remember correctly, they have those 5 votes in favor of this decision, which would in effect repeal Roe v. Wade. Now, it's not a straight 1-to-1 repeal of Roe v. Wade, right? That's not how the Supreme Court works. In other words, it's not like a law where you pass a law saying, hey, I think that I don't know, riding a giraffe on Sunday should be illegal. And then somebody else says, no, I want to repeal that law. It's not exactly like that. Basically, what happens is you make a decision so for example, you have that law, right? Can't ride a giraffe on Sundays. And somebody takes that to the court, and the court makes a ruling saying, okay, well, the government of the state of Idaho is perfectly reasonable in creating this kind of law. And then 40 years down the road, a new person decides to take that to court, and the court makes a ruling and says the Constitution actually prohibits the state of Idaho from making this kind of law. It's not a 1-to-1 repealing, but it's a case that, since it ends up being the most recent one, ends up setting the precedent and sort of indirectly repealing, right, in that way. So that's just an important distinction to make. But nonetheless, let me get a drink of my coffee here real quick. This decision would, in effect, repeal Roe v. Wade if it does end up going through. So let's go ahead and talk about this. This is going to be a really fun article, I think. I don't know. Look, this is a somber topic, right? But I got to be honest with you. I never thought that we would be getting as close as we seem to have been getting in recent years, right? I never thought, for example, that Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett were actually going to be serious about their alleged pro-life leanings and pro-constitutional originalism. I thought it was just a joke. You guys have heard me on the Watchdog say constantly, look, I don't buy it. And there's still things about them that I wouldn't buy if this turned out to be true, but significant amounts of credit given here for proving your boy wrong, because it's an area where I absolutely wished I was wrong, right? I also never thought that we were going to get to a point where this was even active discussion. In other words, like before we had the Alabama law, the Georgia law, the Texas law, before all that kind of stuff, I thought we were going the opposite direction, right? And in some states, we are going the opposite direction, New York, Illinois, Vermont, etc., right? But I was not ready to see states vote to effectively illegalize abortion up to 6 weeks. I was not ready to see those states actually be defended by our Supreme Court, and I was certainly not ready to see the Supreme Court draft a decision that could end up repealing this altogether. And I am 100,000% down with this. We're going to get to some of the things I think about abortion for those of you who may be ignorant of my opinions or perhaps have just forgotten them. But your boy is happy today, let me tell you. I'm hoping it's true. I'm not going to get too excited because it's just a draft. It's not actually set in stone at this point. We don't have the votes yet because they're not locked in, right? I mean, I think the last 2 presidential elections should let us know how important it is not to, to jump ahead on projected votes, right? And assume those projected votes actually manifest as real votes. But I'm excited. I think you should be excited too. This is from Fox News. It doesn't really matter where you get it from. They're all going to say the same thing. But nonetheless, we're going to give credit where credit is due. Bradford Betts and Tyler O'Neill write for Fox News. Supreme Court set to overturn Roe v. Wade. Leaked draft opinion shows. Until an official opinion is signed, Roe v. Wade remains, which is that little brake pump that we need to get here, right? People do need to understand. This has not been decided yet. It looks like it's going to be, but it hasn't been decided yet. So let's not get too excited, but also let's not get unexcited because this is pretty cool. All right. Supreme Court set to overturn Roe v. Wade. Leaked draft opinion shows. The Supreme Court is poised to strike down Roe v. Wade, according to an unprecedented leak of a draft opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito. Now, the very interesting thing about this is the reason this is unprecedented, right? And the reason this is unprecedented is because it was long assumed that the Supreme Court was politically neutral. In other words, traditionally speaking, the Supreme Court, which, by the way, even this is not strictly constitutional because judicial review is not actually found anywhere in the Constitution. Read it for yourself. But it is something that started very, very early on, all the way back to the Jefferson administration, which is the third president of the United States, right? And since then, it has long been assumed that the Supreme Court is to be politically neutral with the sole purpose of interpreting whether or not the law is constitutional, not legislating or giving any sort of ideology one way or the other, or anything along those lines, right? You're not throwing your opinions out there as far as what the law should be, but you're throwing your opinions based on the facts of what the law is, right? Which is a very interesting thing for us to note, especially considering the fact that we now have conversations basically every election cycle of conservative versus liberal justices, right? In other words, we've basically tossed that whole idea outside. But one of the effects of this was the fact that you wouldn't tend to see, or at least it wasn't acceptable to see. I mean, obviously people would suggest it, but the media would always chastise them. The people would always chastise them, right? You wouldn't see leaks of what the courts were going to say. You wouldn't see the courts going, the justices going after each other in a bipartisan manner. You wouldn't see, or in a partisan manner, not bipartisan, excuse me. You wouldn't see partisan splits in the courts. You wouldn't see partisan splits about the courts, right? In other words, the right having what they believe as, the way the courts should be. And we're going to set up all our constitutional originals and all that kind of stuff. And then the left having what they believe the court should be. And that's basically deteriorated and gone away entirely, right? But this is just another example of that deterioration. What we had here is somebody trying to essentially intimidate the justices into making a different decision than that which it appears they're going to make, right? The leaks, obviously we know that leaks are illegal. Very often it is a crime that does need to occur. I think with how much nonsense leaks we've seen recently, it does kind of tend to make us forget that when it comes to, like, for example, Julian Assange, who is still currently being persecuted by 3 different governments, by the way, or when it comes to Edward Snowden, right? Or John Kiriakou, I believe is his name, but the guy who exposed Guantanamo torture. A lot of times leaks can be very positive, very necessary. And yes, it was a crime, but it was a necessary crime. And the quote criminal in that case is a hero. And I mean that entirely. Assange, Kiriakou, Snowden, those are heroes, right? And many others as well. Also, however, there is a lot of reasons, or there are a lot of leaks that end up demonstrating the reasons why this does have to be a crime. And actually, Bradley, now Chelsea Manning, is kind of a half example there. In the end, that leak did need to occur. It demonstrated the indiscriminate slaughter of Iraqi civilians and the covering up of that indiscriminate slaughter by higher-ups in the United States military and government. So we absolutely needed the Manning leak, excuse me. And I do think Manning is a hero. That said, it was very sloppily done. It was done in such a way that numerous troop positions in Iraq were actually leaked to the public, that numerous government officials' personal information was doxed to the public, and so on and so forth. And so this ended up creating, of course, threat to government officials, military officials, people who were actually on patrol and deployed out there in Iraq and Afghanistan and other areas like that. But nonetheless, that's even still kind of an example that goes 50-50, right? Because Manning, I think that did need to occur. It was an absolutely horrendous thing that was happening. And I believe that, despite all the disagreement I've had with Manning since then, and there's much, that was a heroic act. But, other leaks as well, like, for example, when people would leak jury decisions, right? We've seen some of those recently. That's certainly not okay. People leaking the personal information of companies, like what happened to Sony a while back. That's certainly not okay. In fact, we have a word for that. It's doxing. People leaking. Oh, my goodness, excuse me. People leaking the private correspondence between individuals of a non-official capacity, or who are meeting in a non-official capacity, right? In other words, they might be two officials, but they're just having like a dinner or something like that. Obviously, there's a lot of leaks that are wrong, that are just immoral, not always illegal, but sometimes they are. And in this particular instance, what we have is a leak that is meant to get the word out to the public before the decision is actually made, so that the public can react the way that they have, which is incredibly aggressively. And hopefully you can intimidate the justices in doing so. And another effect of this is that you can kind of get the justices to distrust each other, right? Because one of them at least was in on this leak. For certain. That's like literally not disputable in my opinion. I honestly think I might even know which ones it is. But nonetheless, there's no way this information gets to somebody who can get it out to the public without at least one of the justices actively giving this information. And so now you create distrust between the justices, right? In other words, just to put some names, I know Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, but imagine a Supreme Court where Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Samuel Alito didn't actually trust each other enough to discuss these issues in private. And then they just went to their court ruling, right? Alito made his decision and Ginsburg made his decision, and there was no conversation betwixt the two, right? That obviously is not a system that is going to fly. And that's a very real possibility when you have justices, right? Who are unable to actually share this information with each other, right? Who are unable to actually have conversations with each other in honesty and in frankness to try and hammer out these issues and come to the conclusion of what is actually more beneficial for us as a country, what is actually more in line with the Constitution, to be more specific, right? That at this point is essentially eroded, at least has to be slightly eroded because of this leak. Because remember, this leak at this point, nothing has been made public, right? So this is all private correspondence between the members of the court, and probably some stenographer and stuff like that, I guess. But a stenographer is still a member of the court, right? In a way. So I guess that's still not 100% wrong. Nonetheless, we see here in two different ways, both the intimidation of the Supreme Court, as well as the potential eroding of trust between the justices, that this move is very destructive to our justice system and is indeed, as the article says, unprecedented. Not the kind of thing that we would expect to see happening. The draft leak obtained by Politico was written in early February. It was not immediately clear if it has been rewritten or revised. It probably has been rewritten or revised, just considering the fact that it's been a while. Although, of course, that's not a huge amount of time. It's only 3 months. The court has declined to verify or disavow the document. That's not currently accurate anymore. It has been verified by the Chief Justice. But this article is, things are breaking as we speak, right? So that's why this article is going to be a little bit inaccurate in that particular regard. But I digress. The draft leak obtained by Politico was written in early February. It was not immediately clear if it has been rewritten or revised. The court has declined to verify, and again, that's not true anymore, or disavow the document. Analysts have suggested the leak may represent an attempt to pressure a Supreme Court justice to change his or her vote on the pivotal case, which, of course, is what I was just describing to you guys, right? Get it to the public. Public starts rioting, burning stuff, being degenerates as they are, and no disrespect, but at the same time, all of the disrespect, because I'm just sick to death of the mainstream populace in this country. But nonetheless, I digress. Get them to do all their rioting and smashing stuff and lighting Starbucks on fire, even though it's their favorite place. And then, hopefully one of the justices will cower and bow to the mob and change their mind, right? I mean, it's a relatively effective strategy, unfortunately, right? We saw it have a whole bunch of effects during the BLM riots, but nonetheless. Now, of course, this person, I guarantee you, probably supports forced vaccinations, saying my body, my choice. Also, very ironically, says my body, even though it's not. It's literally not. It is a separate entity. And this is one of the things this is why I take such a hardline issue or hardline stance on this issue, right? There are only two options in the abortion conversation because we know that the fetus is alive. That's a matter of indisputable fact, scientific fact, right? We know that the fetus is a separate human person, meaning not like your fingernail is part of you. It has different DNA, or it has the same DNA rather, right? But that thing inside you, that baby, has different DNA. It's separate from you. It is certainly relying on you for nutrients and to grow and all that other kind of stuff, but it's actually not you. So we know it's alive. We know it's separated. We know it's innocent because we have laws to determine whether or not a thing is innocent of a crime. And obviously the idea of a fetus committing a crime is absolutely absurd. And we know it's human. Take a little, drop of its DNA, look at it under a microscope or however it is that you determine that. I don't know how DNA tests work, if I'm being honest with you, but it will come up as human is the point. It's not going to come up as a raccoon or as a clump of cells, right? So it's indisputable that it's separate from you. It's indisputable it's alive. It's indisputable that it is a human, and it is indisputable that it is innocent of any crime. So you are left with two options. You are okay with killing an innocent, independent human life for convenience purposes, or you're not. There isn't middle ground. There isn't nuance. This is not an issue we can see eye to eye on. Those are the facts. You are okay with that kind of killing, or you're not okay with that kind of killing. Now, for the record, a lot of those shout my abortion people, as degenerate as they are, at least they're honest. At least they're honest. At least they're saying, yes, I agree. It is independent and blah, 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 blah. But I think I should be able to kill it anyway. Because it's my body, bodily autonomy, don't have the money, whatever the reason is, right? At least they're honest. They might be no better than slave traders. They might be no better than Gestapo agents. But hey, give credit where credit is due. They're honest people, right? But when it comes to this issue, we have to understand there isn't middle ground. A nuanced opinion is as good as the wrong opinion in this particular example because there is no nuance. Okay? There was no nuance when you were putting Japanese people in internment camps. There was no nuance when you were saying it was legal to kill the mentally handicapped. See 1926, I believe it is, but the Supreme Court decision about that, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but look it up. It is true. There's no nuance in the situation of, whether or not the slave trade as it was performed in Europe and America was ethical. There's no nuance in whether or not putting Jews in concentration camps is a good idea. And this is in that category. It is unnuanced. There is an obviously right opinion, and there is an obviously wrong opinion. Okay? And if you agree with abortion, I'm sorry, but that's just the facts. Like, I don't know. And in fact, I'm not sorry. I really shouldn't say I'm sorry because I'm not sorry. There is no ethical justification for having an abortion. You are either cool with the taking of innocent human life, or you're not cool with the taking of innocent human life. You can deny the science, but that just makes you an idiot. In other words, like, you can deny it's separated, you can deny it's human, you can deny it's alive. Okay, good for you. That's fine. I mean, I can deny that the earth is round, and I can deny that the sky is blue on a sunny day. I can deny that my toenails exist. Just makes me a moron, right? This is the only option you have. You're okay with killing innocent human life if you want to be pro-choice, right? That's the only option you have. On the other side, there is the correct option, which again is the only option you have. You're not okay with taking innocent human life. This isn't comparable to executions because criminals are not innocent. This isn't comparable to warfare because neither party in war is innocent. This isn't comparable to having a gun and shooting a criminal in self-defense because the criminal is not innocent. This isn't comparable to farming because the animal is not human. It isn't comparable to a parasite. The parasite is not human. It isn't comparable to an instance of you getting in a car crash and somebody forcibly taking your liver because you didn't actively choose for that other person to exist. This is all the different reasons people give. Oh, well, I mean, you're okay with the death penalty? Then, oh, man, it's weird that you call yourself pro-life. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. That's a dumb argument. Get a new one. It's not good. I'm sorry that you think that a baby having the audacity to be born in the natural method of reproduction is comparable to a guy raping children. I'm sorry that you think that. I really think that you should see a psychologist, honestly, if you think that. See a therapist, and hopefully this therapist can figure out where it is in your life that you went so wrong as to think these things are comparable. But no, not a good argument. Move on. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, you'd think that somebody should have to give their liver if they got in a car crash and the other person was going to die without that liver? No, not the same thing. Did you actively create that person? Did you sit there and say, hey, you know what? I'm horny. I would very much like to have some penis. And then go and partake in that penis and create that person? I don't think you did. I don't think you did. Not the same. Not the same. None of these arguments work. What is the same? Taking a child, killing that child because you don't have the money. Killing that child because you're not ready to be a parent. Killing that child because, well, you know, I was only 15 when it occurred, and I don't think that's old enough to actually be a parent. Those are the things that are comparable. Again, you're either cool with taking an innocent human life or you are not. And if you're cool with taking an innocent human life, you are welcome to that kind of morality. But don't expect me to get to have any sort of sympathy for your position, right? Can we, be friends and talk on other issues and all this other kind of stuff? Obviously. Don't expect me to have any sympathy for your position. The same way you have no sympathy for a Nazi's position, the same way you would have no sympathy for a American soldier's position against Native Americans, I don't have any sympathy for your position. I'm sorry. Not interested in middle ground. I'm not interested in nuance. I advocate the complete and total abolition of abortion everywhere for any reason. Well, I guess with the exception of threat to the mother's life. But I don't think anybody's ever actually wanted to repeal abortion in that case because the doctor, unfortunately, just has to make a decision in that case. You either lose one life or both, right? So, I don't know. I kind of think that is just something people throw out there to distract because I don't think anybody, I don't even think people in other countries have ever done that. Like, I don't think it's ever been on the table that we repeal abortion in cases of threat to the life because I think that's just a necessary medical procedure. You know what I mean? But hey, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Let's continue on. Until an official, opinion is signed and released by the court, Roe v. Wade, see what I did there? Roe v. Wade. You can probably read it. Remains the law of the land, and drafts circulate and change, as do votes, which is part of the reason why this was actually leaked. Should Roe v. Wade be overturned, abortions would be left for the states to decide, which, by the way, is one thing for us to remember. If this is repealed, you're still going to have legal abortion in a whole bunch of states in the country, probably even over half of them. I know here in Idaho, we have laws on the books that would immediately illegalize all abortion if Roe v. Wade was actually repealed. A couple other states have that as well. Georgia, Alabama, etc. I'm sure Texas probably does. But actually here, it actually says right here in the article, 30. So I guess it would be over half. 30 states have active bans. No, see, it's at the time the court. I knew. Anyways, I shouldn't read ahead, especially if I've already read the article, right? Just trust what I know. Regardless, there's going to be a lot of legal abortion in a whole bunch of places if this does end up going through. And you'll probably have interstate fights because of the fact, like, for example, here in Idaho, Boise is incredibly liberal. Boise is easily as progressive as Seattle in the 90s, as San Francisco in the 90s, right? Portland in the early 2000s, easily, and it'll probably end up looking like those cities in the next 20 years, to be honest with you. So you'll probably have people in Boise fighting with the rest of the state of Idaho, wanting to create a, quote, abortion safe haven in Boise. How exactly that would work? It probably wouldn't. I imagine in the same way that Roe v. Wade prevents the states from actually having, illegalized abortion, I would assume that a law on the books in that state would prevent the towns and counties from having legalized abortion, right? But how that actually ends up working, we don't know. But a lot of these states, definitely California, Washington, Oregon, New York, right? Maryland, Delaware, Illinois, Colorado. These are all Hawaii. These are all going to have illegal abortion still. And that's something that it's important for us to remember. This is not the end of abortion. It's the end of an inability on our part to actually actively fight abortion using the government, which is very different. And which means that the fight would not be over, but nonetheless. Quote, "We hold that Roe and Casey must be overturned," end quote. Justice Samuel Alito writes in the document labeled "The Opinion of the Court for the Case of Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization." Quote, "It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives," end quote. And by the way, that is exactly what the Constitution would demand of us. Just to give an example of this, right? Rape is not a federal crime. Sex with a minor is not a federal crime. Murder is not a federal crime. These crimes are crimes on the local level, as they should be. And it is the local governments that enforce these crimes, or that enforce these laws, that punish these crimes, and that are responsible for the incarceration of these criminals, right? This is because of what we know as federalism. Federalism is the idea that anything that's not explicitly stated within the Constitution ends up being an independent issue for the states to decide. It's the reason why California believes and is right, and why Washington believes and is right, that they can legalize pot, right? And the federal government says, no, you can't do that. We have it federally illegal. Well, you're not legally allowed to do that, right? It's the same reason why you have, varying laws on marriage when you go to different states, varying laws on what age you can be when you serve or drink alcohol, right? Some of you may be familiar with the whole tobacco thing that happened a couple years ago, where the federal government rose the age to, I think it was the ATF, rose the age at which you could legally sell and buy cigarettes to 21. Well, a lot of states just totally ignored that. My own state of Idaho is just like, well, sorry, we're not going to play along. You don't have that right. They're right about that. This is our idea of federalism. The things that the federal government is actually able to decide are very, very, very limited. They are things which are specifically allowed by the Constitution. Namely, they are responsible for preserving rights. They are responsible for creating a basic system of commerce throughout the land, which includes things like, making us all have the same dollar, right? They're responsible for defense of the nation, obviously, right? Drafting military. They are responsible for laws that pertain to federal documentation. So like money laundering laws, right? and obviously other things like immigration and stuff like that. There is a list of things that they're certainly able to do. They're not responsible for governing your marriage, for governing your moral laws, for governing the different drugs you can or cannot take, or anything of that nature, right? And again, that's a very, very rough and poorly explained example of federalism. He says it's time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. And that would mean each individual state would choose whether or not to make abortion a crime. Alito notes at the time the court decided Roe, 30 states had active abortion bans throughout pregnancy. He notes that Americans hold sharply conflicting views on the subject. Quote, some believe fervently that a human person comes into being at conception and that abortion ends an innocent life. Others feel just as strongly that any regulation of abortion invades a woman's right to control her own body and prevents women from achieving full equality. Still others in a third group think that abortion should be allowed under some but not all circumstances, and those within this group hold a variety of views about the particular restrictions that should be imposed. Now, I do want to point out what I see as an absurdity here. People saying invades a woman's right to control her own body, right? I wonder how far we would get if when we had a conversation about rape law, if we said, hey, I don't think that rape law is just. You're controlling what a man can do with his own body, and I just don't think that's okay. I mean, bodily autonomy, right? And of course, people would say, yeah, but the woman. And it's like, yeah, but we're not talking about the woman. We're talking about my bodily autonomy. I mean, who cares about the woman? That's how you guys do abortion, right? Who cares about the baby? Now, of course, lest anyone get confused, I do not believe in any form of legalized rape, right? I actually believe rapists should be executed. And I'm very fervent in that. However, I think it gives you an example of just how ridiculous the argument actually is. Every law in some way restricts what you can or cannot do with your body because bodily autonomy is not absolute, right? You have no right to use your body to beat up your spouse. You have no right to use your body to rape somebody. You have no right to use your body to go murder somebody, right? Every law, in effect, restricts something that you can do with your body, obviously. Like, duh. I think the idea of bodily autonomy, to be honest with you, as it's described in, feminist circles, is just not a thing that exists. You don't have that kind of autonomy over your body. You don't have an autonomy that is so absolute as to allow you to victimize innocent parties, right? I mean, it seems to me like that's obvious. That's the whole reason for having law in the first place, right? You're not allowed to victimize innocent parties. And there's a lot of different ways in which you can do that. In fact, in some states, very rarely anymore because of no fault-based divorce, but in some states, you can't even do that in the form of like divorcing somebody. See things like child support and custody battles and alimony, right? Like even that kind of victimizing somebody because, now you've cut off their financial stability, you've created one less parent in the home or potentially split parenthood, all the other different kinds of things. It was considered victimization in many courts for a long period of time, still should be. You're not even allowed to do that without serious consequences. So like this version of bodily autonomy that makes you the absolute sovereign over your own self, it's just not a thing. It doesn't exist. It never has existed. You don't have those rights. And you never will have those rights, frankly. I see in the live chat something that I just want to mention. Seems like the pro-slavery argument would be more applicable for a pro-life stance. And, without necessarily commenting on that in particular, it does just remind me of what the slavery arguments actually were, right? So for some of you who may not know, Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans never actually wished to abolish slavery, but they wished to restrict it to a geographical location, namely the Deep South. The idea was any state that has legal slavery can keep it, but any new state to be added will not have the right to decide whether or not they have legal slavery. And the argument from the opposing side, the pro-slaver side, was we have a constitutional right to our property, and we can do with our property what we wish and take our property where we wish, when we wish. And it is kind of a funny thing there, right? Because you have this, once again, this idea that is accurate, namely that you have a right to your own private property and you can do with that private property what you see fit. But once again, it's taken to this absolute stage, right? Where it's like you can even actively victimize innocent parties by virtue of your, private property rights, excuse me. And of course, we now recognize that that's completely absurd. And you have a very similar thing going on. I think even worse here because, slavery, as bad as it was in the United States, slavery does not end in the murder of a slave. At least not every time, right? A lot of times it would, certainly. But generally, the slaver likes to keep his slaves alive so that they can work for him. Well, guess what? Abortion 100% of the time ends in the termination of the life. Every single time. So, if you want to start comparing, you're comparing apples to oranges. And the rotten apple is abortion. Fox News has reached out to the White House for comment, and Biden's comments were incredibly stupid. Biden said basically that he thought a whole litany of rights were going to be under threat now, even though there is no right to abortion anywhere in the United States Constitution. There is no implied right to an abortion anywhere in the Constitution either. And by the way, Democrats even know this, which is why they're currently talking about codifying it in law and removing the filibuster so that they can do so. Which, of course, they want to remove the filibuster because that's the whole point. We need to cheat. We need to maybe, for example, stack the Supreme Court, remove filibuster, create new voting districts like Washington, D.C. We need to cheat so that we can get our way. It's the liberal progressive way, don't you know? Disclosing a draft opinion case is an extremely, can't talk, sorry. Disclosing a draft opinion in a Supreme Court case is an extremely rare occurrence. Jonathan Turley, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, appeared on Fox News Hannity Monday evening to discuss the report, saying he could not think of a historical precedent, and I myself cannot either. An error occurred while retrieving the tweet, and it may have been deleted. Politico reported that 5 of the original votes to overturn Roe remain unchanged as of this week, but it did not report that they have all said they will join the Alito opinion. SCOTUS blog suggested that the leak may aim to pressure a justice to switch his or her vote. And again, I do want to point out that a couple hours in the future after this article was written, we do now have confirmation that the leak was legit. Anyways. Quote, at least one is apparently unconfirmed, hence the leak, end quote, the Supreme Court analysis tweeted. Quote, those interested in who leaked the draft should wonder why Alexander Ward, a national security reporter, shares the byline, end quote, SCOTUS blog added. Quote, the leaker would insist that their identity be incredibly tightly held. Politico would not assign someone who didn't have to be on their story, end quote. And personally, I think that the leaker is probably one of the dissenting justices. I would bet a paycheck on it. Real Clear Investigation senior writer Mark Hemingway suggested that someone leaked the draft opinion as part of a public pressure campaign to reverse the decision. Quote, leaking a draft opinion is a scumbag move designed to create public pressure against the court before the decision is finalized, end quote, Hemingway tweeted. I happen to agree with that. CNN's Mike Valero claimed that Chief Justice John Roberts, a justice known for upholding precedent whom former President George H.W. Bush appointed, does not want to overturn Roe. Excuse me. Quote, Roberts does not want to completely overturn Roe v. Wade, meaning he apparently would be dissenting from Alito's draft opinion. No surprise there. Likely with the court's 3 liberals, sources tell CNN, end quote, Valero tweeted. Quote, Roberts is willing, however, to uphold Mississippi law banning abortion at 15 weeks, CNN has learned, end quote. And that's actually somewhat standard amongst the older, more liberal parties. The progressive way of looking at abortion is actually relatively new. Part of that, in my humble and unbiased opinion, is because my generation and the generations following me and the generations immediately preceding me are just utterly detestable. It's kind of amazing to talk to people who are even 10 years older than me. And it's like, we live in completely different worlds, and my world is dystopian. I know very, very, very little people who are actually even concerned with the murder of unborn babies. In fact, most people I know are much more concerned with whether or not a man who thinks he's a woman has the right to use a woman's bathroom than they are concerned with the ability of a child to have or not the ability, but the right of a child to have a chance at a fulfilling life here, or a life at all for that matter. Just a chance at it, right? Know a lot more people who are more concerned with whether or not pot should be legal. And that one I even agree with. I think pot should be legal. I think it's ridiculous to throw somebody in jail for smoking weed. But the idea that that's more of a concern than whether or not babies are murdered in the womb, I mean, it's disgusting, frankly. I know more people who are more interested with what Kyler Murray's contract negotiations are in the NFL than they are with the murder of unborn babies. It's like not even a thing amongst my generation. You know what I mean? They're so utterly ignorant of this issue, and willingly so. They just don't care. They just don't care. And I know many people who have had abortions and constantly get that thrown in my face. People saying things like, oh, well, in fact, I love the meme in an ironic way. I love the meme that says, 25% of women will have an abortion. It's likely somebody as if that's supposed to change my mind. Right? I have a good relationship, a good friendship with a man who's currently in prison for very brutal spousal abuse. Okay? I care deeply for this person, despite the fact that he has committed this crime. I'm 100% down with him being in prison for committing this crime, which is where I'm going with this, right? In other words, just because I know a guy who's beating up his chick does not mean that all of a sudden, the lights are on and I'm magically cool with beating chicks now, right? Because that's brilliant and makes so much sense, apparently, according to all the liberals I know. But that's what they expect in this situation. Well, what if it was your sister, your wife, your grandmother who had an abortion? Well, then it sucks that they're evil. I mean, do you expect me to change? Because I'm not gonna. Frankly, I'm not gonna. And I shouldn't. And you shouldn't. If the fact that somebody did a thing makes you, well, I guess that thing's not evil. I love this person, and therefore it can't be evil because they did this thing. I mean, I really hope that you are never, around a situation like, for example, systemic sexual abuse at Penn State or a Catholic church. Or, oh, man, it's crazy. Now that I think about it, how do you think those things actually take place? Because of people like you. Well, I mean, he's a good guy, so maybe it's not that bad. She's my friend, so maybe I should rethink this and be a little bit nuanced. No, not how it works. Not how it works. It's evil. If you love the person, then you love them and it's evil. Those are not contradictory facts. There's Justice Roberts right there. He looks like such a Hollywood actor, to be honest with you. It makes me laugh. That's completely irrelevant to the show. But I just want to point out, this dude should have been in movies. Anyways, hang on, not anyways, real quick. Have you ever, I mean, obviously now we have the movies, right? So it's hard to imagine anybody else other than Chris Evans. But have you ever, like, back before the movies, read comic books and just thought, like, oh, this is what I think Captain America would look like? Yeah, it's Justice Roberts. Anyways. Apparently, anticipating a similar move from the court, states the Democratic legislatures have passed laws codifying abortion in cases Roe gets overturned. Governor Jared Polis, a Democrat from Colorado, signed a law creating a fundamental right to abortion and denying any right for the unborn. In 2019, Governor Andrew Cuomo, a noted old person murderer and sexual assaulter, by the way, signed a law codifying abortion rights and explicitly removing protections from unborn infants. By the way, that is not a joke. In New York, if you murder a pregnant woman, it is now no longer double homicide because the right of the, personhood of the fetus is not recognized. Not a joke. Look it up. Passed in 2019 by the same guy who murdered like 15,000 old people. The Connecticut legislature has passed a bill aimed at combating abortion restrictions in other states, which is, expected, unfortunately. People have been saying they want to turn themselves into abortion safe havens for quite some time, but is quite detestable. The states bordering Idaho on the western side, Oregon and Washington, are both wanting to be this, especially considering that Idaho would have some of the harshest abortion laws on the books. Thank God. And I mean that literally, thank God. I don't mean that just like a figurative, the way that people say it today. I mean, like, literally, thank God that I live in the state that has its head on straight, because there's not very many of them left. Meanwhile, states with Republican legislatures have passed laws restricting abortion, with Texas and Idaho passing laws allowing private citizens to file suits against individuals who aid or abet abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected at about 6 weeks of pregnancy. There's my boys right there, Idaho. Woot woot. By the way, Ammon Bundy for governor of Idaho 2022. In case any of you guys live in this state, definitely check him out. Vote for him. Constitutional originalist and like hardcore on it. And that is exactly what we need. I digress. While many polls suggest Americans support Roe, which, let me real quick, I'm going to restart the sentence, but let me just real quick say two things. Number one, it doesn't actually matter whether or not people support a thing. That's not what should determine what is or is not the law. Okay. What should determine what is or is not the law is justice and morality, right? As well as the Constitution. Like, for example, if we think that it's contrary to morality to allow atheists to blaspheme our Lord, right? Well, they do have that right under the Constitution, and frankly, I think they should. I don't think that Jesus would be down with anti-blasphemy laws in the United States either, just for the record. Obviously in our perfect theocracy in which he is the king, those I think would be there. But here in these earthly governments, I don't think that kind of thing is good. And so that should be, I think, the determining factor as far as what makes our laws. For just to give, I already mentioned pot, so let me just give the pot example. If 90% of the country thinks that it should be federally illegal, it doesn't matter. The United States government does not have the right to regulate substances. The individual states do, and if 90% of the country believes it should be illegal, then you'd effectively have it illegal everywhere, right? But the Constitution says quite plainly, any power not directly delegated to the federal government is given to the people in the states. It's in the 9th and 10th Amendments, and it's reiterated in both of them, right? Excuse me. So I don't care whether or not people support it or not. It doesn't matter, right? People support slavery. Doesn't matter. Is the slavery system we had here in America just or unjust is the question, right? People support interning Japanese people. Doesn't matter. Is it just? Is it constitutional? That is the question, right? So on and so forth, right? But it is true that most Americans support the woman's ability to murder her child. And, there's a lot of voices out there, PragerU, Steven Crowder, Daily Wire, who really strongly believe that we are turning the tide and going conservative. And I got to be honest with you, I don't think that they're aware of what's going on outside of their little bubble, because that's not true. It's simply not the case. Now, it would be fantastic if our laws reflected what was just, in spite of what the populace believes. But the populace, as it stands today, they're very anti-marriage. They're very anti-child. They're very pro-liberated sex. This is just the norm. I mean, I think the fact that Cardi B is a Grammy-winning artist should be all the evidence I actually need to demonstrate that. Right? While many polls suggest Americans support Roe, in-depth polling reveals a more complicated picture. When asked about their opinion on abortion during specific periods of pregnancy and other situations, 71% of Americans say they support restricting an abortion to the first 3 months of pregnancy. 22%, I don't know why there's parentheses there, 22%. Or in other limited circumstances such as rape and incest, 28%. This is worded very weirdly, but I think what they're trying to say is that 71% of Americans support restricting abortion, with 22% supporting restricting it in the first 3 months of pregnancy, 28% supporting restrictions in the case of like rape or incest and threat to the mother's life and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. That was worded weird. Maybe I'm just retarded. But that was worded weird. Only 17% of Americans said abortion should be available during an entire pregnancy, and 12% said it should be restricted to the first 6 months. Now, again, I don't think that what the populace believes should be the determining factor here. The Constitution and what is just should be the determining factors here. But, that's certainly not what a lot of other people believe. So, I get why they're referencing the statistics. Now, I don't care what other people believe, quite frankly. This is my show, so I'm going to talk about what I believe. But, I digress. Now, for the record, again, I don't know anybody who is against, quote, abortion. And I say quote abortion because for the longest time it wasn't even called that. To save the life of the mother. I think everybody in society, even the most ardent abolitionists, fully recognizes that there are extreme circumstances in which the doctor is forced to make a decision between saving one life or saving no lives. And I get that. If I'm ignorant on that, then I guess somebody can let me know. But my understanding has been that has never been controversial, right? My understanding is that we have always agreed, left and right, that those kinds of situations do occur. And you can kind of think of it similarly to like, somebody gets their, here, let's use breast cancer as an example. Somebody gets their breasts amputated because of breast cancer, because of a severe case of breast cancer, right? We all recognize that is an extreme situation that is necessary in order to save a life. But that doesn't mean that we're cool with just going out and amputating women's breasts, right? And that's obviously a reductio ad absurdum. But, I think it makes the point, is basically what I'm getting at. But nonetheless, this is a huge thing. This is a huge thing, right? It is possible that we are actually going to see the end of abortion in this country in our lifetime. Not even in our lifetime, but in the next calendar year. And that would be stunning, in my opinion. I don't know if it would last. I don't even really know if it's going to come because we have this intimidation here. We'll see. We'll see. But we should be in prayer. We should be hoping for revival, right? One of the interesting things you find in the Bible is Jeremiah and Isaiah and all these other prophets have already prophesied the destruction of Judah. It's coming, right? But you get kings like Hezekiah and Josiah who have little periods of revival in their monarchies. because of their holiness, right? They start promoting Jehovah worship and promoting the law of Moses and all these other kinds of things. And so it's almost like it's stayed off for a little bit. All things are in God's hands, in my opinion, but I think that we have an opportunity to have something like that occur. The destruction of America is imminent. The destruction of the world is imminent. The coming of the Messiah a second time is imminent, in my opinion. But it is possible, it is even biblical for us to have more time and for us in that time to have great revival, right? Now, is the illegalizing of abortion equal to revival? No, it isn't. But it's a sign that there is an opportunity here, right, for such a thing to occur. And so, I would definitely say be in prayer for that. Let's not get too excited. Let's understand this could potentially go the completely opposite direction. Let's also understand the backlash is about to be severe, friends. You're going to see riots. If you live in a major city, they're coming to a city near you, right? Namely the one you live in. The midterm elections are about to get real spicy because of this issue. We're going to see a lot more violence. We're probably going to see a spike in progressive terrorism, which, of course, we saw huge spikes of in 2016 and 2020. We're probably going to see general backlash, right, from the left. And it's going to be violent. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to be slanderous, right? You're going to see states like Illinois, California, all that create a lot stricter laws. So just expect all that. And again, if you live in a major city, you should be used to it at this point, but board the windows, grab your guns. There's going to be fires, right? That doesn't mean we're going to lose. It just simply means you need to expect what's coming. Also, even though it may not actually happen, do expect this to fall through. Why? Because we do not want to be putting all of our eggs in this basket and then being disappointed when the basket falls and the eggs break. Okay. So definitely also be expecting, the possibility that this just doesn't happen at all. But if it does, let's just know we're going to get hard swing to the left. Let me not say it that way. We're going to get a hard swing from the left is the way I should say. We're going to get riots. We're going to get protests. We're going to get the media going on about it forever and ever. Your favorite YouTuber and favorite actor are probably going to make some, pre-written speech that they don't even agree with so that people will give them more money. All that kind of stuff, right? But nonetheless, I think we have potentially a really great thing happening here. It's the first time I think we've had a really great thing happening in the United States for quite some time. So definitely pray for that. We didn't get to any of the other things I wanted to talk about, but this was breaking news and it was important and we needed to talk about it. So if you liked this episode, my friends, please do consider liking and sharing this video. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel and hitting that bell to get notified every time we go live. We try to go live here with the Watchdog on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Please consider getting this out to all the different social media platforms which you frequent. Get this out to your congregants. Get this out to your friends, your family, your acquaintances, your coworkers, anybody who you think would benefit from this information. While you're in the process of sharing this to the different social media platforms which you frequent, please consider not only tagging me, but also following me. I am on Gab, Parler, Minds, Facebook, and Twitter. You can find me at the tag The Synagogue on any of those websites, and I certainly appreciate in advance anybody who is sharing or following there. By the way, get on Gab. That should be the ones that you're getting on beforehand. Consider that, consider the possibility of potentially jumping on Rumble and subscribing on Rumble just in case these videos get taken down. There's a very high likelihood. In fact, despite the fact that I only have 48 subscribers, I already have had videos taken down. So definitely consider subscribing on Rumble, and I'll try to get better at making sure I'm actually posting to Rumble. And lastly, but not leastly, if you guys think that this is good information, if you think it needs to go out, if you think it's important, if you do believe that I am somebody who is offering truth and clarity, studying well, all those kinds of things, I plan on making this a career. And you can help make that happen either by a subscription to my Patreon of any amount whatsoever, or a one-time donation to the PayPal of any amount whatsoever. I ask only that you give with intent to promote truth and not for any other reason, right? I want to earn your money. I don't want to just take it. But I do want to make this a career. I don't want to lie to you guys and come. I hate when people get out there and they're like, well, I'm not looking for views or money. Like, yes, you are. You have a Patreon and you have a YouTube channel. You literally are. And that's fine. All right. I mean, I don't understand why that's a problem. But be honest with the people and let them know, hey, I want this to be my career. So and think about giving me your money. But nonetheless, I digress. I appreciate you guys tremendously. Want to remind you to be watchdogs. And I want to ask you guys the question, in the face of Armageddon, will you compromise